The moment Dr. Hargrove told her to get back to her mop, Slade didn't flinch. She just looked at him. That steady, flat look she'd learned somewhere between Kandahar and a forward operating base that no longer existed on any map. And then she turned around and walked back down the hallway the way she'd come. The fluorescent light above the supply closet buzzed and flickered. It had been doing that for 3 weeks. She'd put in a maintenance request. Nobody had followed up. That was fine. She knew how to work around things that were broken. The Millhaven Community Health Centre wasn't much to look at. A converted 2-story building on the edge of a small Ontario town. One of those places that sat somewhere between a clinic and a hospital, without being quite enough of either. It served the surrounding townships, farming families mostly, a few retirees, some younger people who couldn't make the drive to Kingston. There was one attending physician, 2 nurses, a rotating cast of locums, and Gwen Hallett, who handled maintenance, light repairs, and whatever else nobody else wanted to deal with. That was her, Gwen. She'd been at Millhaven for about 7 months. Before that, Trenton. Before that, a VAC caseworker and a lot of appointments she stopped showing up to. Before that, well, before that was a different life, a different version of her. She was 34 years old, and she moved like she was always listening for something. Dr. Hargrove had been there 4 years and operated with the particular confidence of a man who had never been wrong about anything, as far as he could tell. He was not a bad doctor. He was thorough, mostly. He cared about his patients in the distracted way that certain men care about things, with intensity when it was convenient, and with irritation when it wasn't. He was 47, had trained in Toronto, and had come to Millhaven because his wife's family was from the area. He had not entirely forgiven any of them for it. The new locum was named Dr. Fabrice Osei, and he'd arrived on a Tuesday in November with a duffel bag and a calm, careful manner that Hargrove found vaguely threatening. Osei had done humanitarian work. He asked questions slowly and listened to the full answer, which Hargrove considered inefficient. The nurses, Petra Sigurdsson and a younger woman named Amara Diallo, liked Osei immediately. Gwen hadn't formed an opinion yet, she observed. That was habit. It started with a patient named Roy Callender. He came in on a Thursday morning, driven by his daughter, who waited in the parking lot with the engine running because she had to get back to work. Roy was 61, a retired millwright, and he'd been feeling off for about a week. Pressure in his chest, fatigue, some shortness of breath that he'd attributed to the cold weather, and the fact that he hadn't slept well since his wife passed in the spring. Gwen was in the corridor outside exam room 2, replacing a hinge on a supply cabinet door. She wasn't trying to listen. She just had good ears, and the walls in Millhaven were not thick. She heard Hargrove ask Roy about his symptoms. She heard Roy describe them, carefully, apologetically, the way men of that generation described pain, like they were embarrassed to be taking anyone's time. She heard Hargrove say, "Blood pressure's a little elevated, but that's not unusual. I'm going to order some blood work. We'll get you back in next week." She stopped what she was doing. She stayed very still for a moment, the screwdriver in her hand, listening. Roy's voice again, quieter. "The pressure gets worse when I walk, like upstairs." "That's probably deconditioning. You mentioned you've been less active since your wife passed." Gwen put down the screwdriver. She went to the nursing station and waited. Petra was at the desk, entering notes. Gwen kept her voice low. "Mr. Callender in room 2. Do you know if Dr. Hargrove's ordered an ECG?" Petra looked up. "Not that I've seen. Why?" "Exertional chest pressure, fatigue, sleep disruption. He's 61. It might be worth flagging. Petra looked at her for a moment, not unkindly. I'll mention it to Dr. Hargrove. She did. Gwen heard the exchange from the hallway. Hargrove came out of the exam room, found Gwen still in the corridor, and looked at her the way people looked at things that were slightly out of place. Did you have a concern about my patient? His tone wasn't angry. It was something more precise than anger. It was dismissal shaped like a question. I just thought, given the presentation. Are you a physician? No. Right. He held her gaze for exactly 1 beat longer than necessary. I think we can handle the clinical decisions. If the cabinet's fixed, there's a leak in the staff washroom that's been flagged for 2 weeks. He went back to his office. Gwen stood in the hallway a moment. Then she picked up her tools and went to find the leak. Roy Callender was discharged with a bloodwork requisition and a pamphlet about grief counseling. He had a heart attack in the parking lot 40 minutes later. His daughter found him slumped against the passenger door, still holding his requisition form. She screamed. Someone inside heard. Petra ran out first, then Amara. By the time Gwen came around the side of the building, with a bag of salt for the front steps, there were already 3 people crouched around Roy on the pavement, and none of them were doing the right things. She registered the scene in pieces, the way she always did under pressure. Not panic, not slow motion, just a kind of crystalline clarity that had been trained into her over years, and that she had never entirely lost, no matter how much she'd tried to leave it behind. Roy was conscious but barely. Pale, diaphoretic. His color was wrong. His breathing was shallow and labored. Amara was on the phone with 911. Petra was holding his hand and telling him to stay with her, which was the right instinct but not enough. Hargrove came through the front doors at a half jog and stopped, taking stock. Get him inside, he said. We need to. Don't move him, Gwen said. Everyone looked at her. If it's cardiac, moving him could. I said get him inside. Hargrove wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the patient. We're not doing this in a parking lot. It's November and it's 2 degrees. If you bring him inside and he arrests before EMS gets here, you've got more room to work. But if you move him wrong and he arrests mid-carry, who are you? Hargrove's voice had gone very quiet. That specific quietness that was its own kind of loudness. Gwen, I do maintenance. I know who you are. I'm asking what makes you think you can. He's going to lose consciousness in the next 2 minutes, she said. I need an AED. I need aspirin if he hasn't already had it, and I need someone to get me a bag mask from the crash cart. Please. The please was deliberate. She'd learned that too. People move faster when you say please. It takes the ego out of the equation. There was a pause. 3 seconds, maybe 4. That felt much longer. Mara moved first. She went back inside. Petra looked at Hargrove. Hargrove looked at Gwen. You have 30 seconds to tell me what makes you qualified to. I spent 6 years as a combat medical technician with the Canadian Armed Forces, Gwen said. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Mali. I've managed cardiac events in environments with no equipment and no backup. I'm not qualified to diagnose him, and I'm not trying to. I'm trying to keep him alive until EMS arrives. She met his eyes. You can take over any time you want, but I need you to decide right now. Roy made a sound, low and frightened. Hargrove stepped back. She worked. It came back the way muscle memory always does. Not comfortably, not easily, but completely. Like a language you thought you'd forgotten until someone put you in a country where you had no other choice. Amara brought the bag mask. Gwen talked her through positioning. Petra handled the AED, following Gwen's instructions, and Gwen monitored Roy's breathing and pulse with her fingers and her eyes, and the particular attention of someone who had once done this in the dark, in the dust, with the sound of things she didn't want to think about anymore. Hargrove stayed close. She could feel him deciding whether to intervene with every passing minute. He didn't. She didn't know if it was because he trusted her, or because something in her manner made it clear that an interruption right now would cost Roy something he couldn't afford to lose. Osi arrived. He'd been in with another patient and hadn't heard the commotion until Petra found him. He came through the front doors at a jog, assessed the scene in about 4 seconds, and then crouched down across from Gwen with no preamble. "What do you need?" she told him. He did it. Roy's pressure was dropping. She talked Osi through what she was seeing, what she was doing, why. He asked one question. Precise, clinical, and she answered it, and something shifted between them, some wordless professional acknowledgement that had nothing to do with credentials and everything to do with competency. EMS arrived 11 minutes after the call. Roy was conscious. His color had improved slightly. He was frightened and confused, and he kept asking about his daughter. "She's inside," Gwen told him. "She's okay. She knows you're okay." He reached up and found her wrist. His grip was weak but deliberate. "Thank you," he said. It came out rough, like it was scraped from somewhere deep. She didn't answer. She just held his wrist back, lightly, until the paramedics took over. She was sitting on the front steps when Osi came to find her. The EMS unit had gone. The parking lot was quiet again, the pavement still faintly marked where Roy had been lying. The cold had settled in properly now, the kind of late November cold that had a weight to it, and she was still in her work jacket, no gloves, hands around a coffee that had gone cold while she wasn't paying attention. Osi sat down beside her without asking. He was quiet for a moment. 6 years CMT, he said. Afghanistan and Mali. Yeah. That's not light work. She didn't say anything. Why maintenance? He asked it simply, with no judgment in it, the way a person asks a question they genuinely want answered. She thought about it. The honest answer was long and had a lot of rooms in it, and most of those rooms she kept closed. The short answer was still true enough to be worth saying. I needed something small for a while. He nodded slowly. That was all. After a moment, he said, Callender's going to make it. I spoke to the paramedic. They're saying the intervention was. He paused, chose the word carefully, significant. She looked out at the parking lot. He should have had an ECG this morning. Yes, Osi said, he should have. Neither of them said anything else about that. Hargrove found her an hour later. She was back in the supply closet, inventory sheet in hand, counting saline flushes that someone had misfiled behind the gauze pads. When she heard the door, she didn't turn around. Hallett. Dr. Hargrove. He came in. She heard him close the door, which was unusual. Supply closets were not where this man had conversations. She turned around. He looked. She searched for the word. Not humbled, exactly. Not apologetic. More like a man who had driven into a ditch and was still sitting there with his hands on the wheel, trying to understand how it had happened. Callender, he said. Boy, heard he's stable. He is. A pause, you were right. About the ECG, about moving him. She didn't say anything. I've been here 4 years, Hargrove said. I know every patient in this building, and most of the ones in the surrounding township. I know what we can and can't handle here. I know this clinic. He stopped, started again. I didn't know you. You didn't ask. It came out quieter than she intended, not accusatory, just the fact of it. He absorbed that. "No," he said, "I didn't." The fluorescent light in the supply closet hummed between them. "I'm going to be honest with you," he said finally. "I don't entirely know what to do with this. Professionally, I mean. You're not registered. You're not licensed to practice in this province. What you did today was," he paused, "it was necessary. I know that, but it also exists in a space that I don't have clear protocols for." "I know," she said. "I wasn't trying to practice. I was trying to keep someone from dying in a parking lot." "I understand that." He was quiet a moment. "Do you have any interest in?" He started, then stopped. "There are bridging programs for former military medical personnel to translate those credentials into." "I know about the programs." "Right." He looked at her. "Why didn't you?" She had a dozen answers for that. Most of them were true. Some of them were too personal to say to a man she'd met 7 months ago and exchanged maybe 40 words with. "I wasn't ready," she said, "before." The word before carried a weight he probably didn't fully understand, and she didn't try to explain it. But something in his face shifted anyway. Some crack in the professional surface that let through, briefly, something more human underneath. "Mr. Callender asked about you," he said. "He wanted to know your name. His daughter wants to send something. She doesn't know what, she just..." He stopped. "She said she wanted to thank whoever." "What?" Gwen looked down at the inventory sheet in her hands. "Oh, she doesn't have to do anything." "I know she doesn't." He was quiet. "I'm going to tell her your name anyway." She didn't object to that. Petra caught her in the hallway before the end of shift. She was small and direct, and had been nursing for 22 years, and had very little patience for anything other than what she called the actual thing, which meant whatever was true and necessary and right in front of you. She handed Gwen a piece of paper without explanation, a website, a program name, a contact number. "My nephew went through it," Petra said. "He was a medic with the Royals. Took him 14 months. He's in a merge in Sudbury now." She looked at Gwen steadily. "Just in case you were ready." Gwen looked at the paper. She thought about Roy Callender's grip on her wrist. Weak and deliberate, like he was holding on to something and making a decision about it at the same time. She folded the paper carefully and put it in her jacket pocket. "Thanks, Petra." "Don't thank me." Petra was already walking away. "Just think about it." She drove home in the dark, the way she always did, the long way around through the back roads she'd learned, because they were quieter. Snow had started, just a dusting, the first real one of the season, settling lightly on the fields on either side of the road. She thought about 6 years of her life that lived in her hands without permission. That showed up when she was counting saline flushes, or changing fluorescent lights, or sitting on cold steps with cold coffee. She thought about all the ways she'd tried to make herself smaller, tried to find some version of ordinary that she could fit inside without all of it spilling out. She thought about Roy saying, "Thank you," with what might have been his last good breath for a while. She thought about Osi asking why maintenance, and the way he'd listened to her answer, without fixing it or filling it in. She pulled into her driveway and sat in the car for. A few minutes after she turned off the engine, the snow coming down in the headlight wash, small and quiet and serious, burnt. Then she reached into her jacket pocket and took out the paper Petra had given her. She read it once, then again. 7 months was long enough to be small. She'd needed it. She didn't need to apologize for needing it, but she also knew. The same way she'd known Roy Callender was in trouble before anyone else in that building had thought to look. that the time for small was ending. She took out her phone. It was late. Too late to call. She'd call in the morning. She sat with that for a moment, the decision sitting in her chest like something that had finally settled into the right position after a long time of being slightly off. Outside, the snow kept coming down, covering the long flat fields, covering the road she'd driven in on. By morning, everything would look clean and unwritten and entirely possible. She went inside. I keep thinking about the moment Gwen put down the screwdriver. She didn't announce anything. She didn't argue. She just stopped what she was doing and walked to the nursing station and asked a quiet question about a man she'd never met, because something in what she'd heard told her he was in trouble, and she couldn't unknow it. That's the part that stays with me. Not the parking lot, not the hands-on knee work she did while everyone else was still figuring out where to stand. The moment before all of that, the moment she chose to say something, even though she already knew how it was going to land. There's a word for that kind of integrity. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wait for the right conditions or the right audience. It's just the thing you do when you know what's right, even when doing it costs you something, even when a man in a white coat looks at you like you're furniture that learned to talk. Gwen had every reason to let it go. She had no title, no credentials anyone in that building recognized, no reason to believe she'd be heard. She said something anyway. That's not small. That's actually the whole thing. What I also keep thinking about is Hargrove, because it would be easy to write him off as the villain of this story, and I don't think that's quite right. He was a doctor who made assumptions about who belonged where, about who was worth listening to. He was wrong in a way that almost cost Roy Callender his life. But when it mattered most, he stepped back. That took something too, a different kind of intelligence than the clinical kind, the kind that can recognize its own limits in real time and get out of the way. Not everyone can do that. A lot of people would have dug in harder just to protect the story they'd already told themselves. And then there's Gwen herself in those 6 years of training that lived in her hands even when she was trying to live quietly. She didn't lose those skills by ignoring them. She didn't lose herself by choosing something small for a while. She just waited, without knowing that's what she was doing. There's something in that about what it means to keep going through the years when nothing feels like it's adding up, when you're counting saline flushes in a supply closet in a small Ontario town and wondering what any of it is for. The work was still in her. The steadiness was still in her. It doesn't disappear just because you stop using it. I think about people like Gwen a lot, the ones who have done hard, serious things and then chosen something quiet afterward, not because they gave up, but because they needed to find their footing again. We don't always see them. We don't always think to look. Roy Callender's daughter wanted to thank whoever. She didn't even have a name yet, just whoever. Sometimes that's all any of us are, until someone pays enough attention to notice what we're actually carrying. Petra handed Gwen a piece of paper. Gwen put it in her pocket. She called in the morning. That's the whole arc, really. You survive something. You get small for a while, and then one day you reach into your pocket and find out you still have everything you need.